Keep your friends close and your online accounts closer, because horrifyingly, 7 million online accounts are hacked every single day. What makes matters worse is that 95% of those hackers are never caught. With the world becoming more and more interconnected digitally and through IoT devices, the threat of cybersecurity attacks is growing exponentially. As we've seen with recent attacks on oil and water companies, the ramifications of remaining vulnerable can be devastating. Because of this, it is crucial that we put cybersecurity at the forefront of our minds as our society becomes more and more technologically advanced. I am your host, Mike Lake, and in today's preview, I'll be talking with Chastity Wright and Doug McCullough about how their company, Infiltron, is on a mission to secure the smart cities of the future and every online account while they're at it.
Innovation, resiliency, discovery. Join Mike Lake, President and CEO of Leading Cities, as we explore the technologies shaping the possibilities of our future with a preview of tomorrow.
Hello and welcome, Doug and Chastity. And it's so great to have you here on another episode of Preview of Tomorrow. I really thank you both for taking the time to join us. And of course, I also want to thank you, all of our listeners and viewers. This is going to be an exciting episode, and I'm really pleased and proud to introduce you to both Doug McCullough, who is the CEO of Infiltron Software Suite, and Chastity Wright, who is the founder and CTO. This is a company, if you haven't heard of it, you should know about it, because they have created the world's first proven AI blockchain quantum solution for end-to-end supporting architecture encompassing real-time, proactive protection, and lifecycle management. Now, that is a mouthful. But what we're really talking about here is, I'm going to simple it down for a simple mind like my own, to say we're talking cybersecurity, folks. So, Doug, Chastity, before we jump into this, which is obviously a huge and growing problem, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Well, sure. I'll go first. I'm Doug McCullough, and I've been the Chief Information Officer for 2 cities. So I have looked at firsthand the whole smart cities movement, dealt with smart mobility, connected and autonomous vehicles, and seen how cities are dipping their toes into blockchain. And so I have a lot of experience dealing with questions of how we're going to remain secure. And I got associated with Chastity, and we found that this security problem or security solution is just awesome. And we both jumped in with both feet. So.
Yeah, and I'm Chastity, right? And I'm the founder and kind of the catalyst of this solution. And my background stems from being in the military, serving in the U.S. Air Force, where cybersecurity is a major topic of discussion. It's a major part of projects. And I was in during the Iraqi and Afghanistan war. So even more heightened sense of security and cybersecurity. So, and my background is I'm an aerospace engineer by trade, did telecommunications. I've worked it with every type of software you can imagine. And with having that high level insight, Infiltron, we're going to round it up. Infiltron kind of was birthed out of having the insight of different industries and seeing the vulnerabilities of those industries and knowing that we were moving to more innovative technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, and definitely in, city settings as well.
Well, before we go even one step further, I want to thank both of you sincerely for your public service in the military and, of course, municipal government. We don't pause enough to thank those who serve the public. So thank you both.
No problem.
Now, let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity. There are just so many hacks every single day. I mean, I've seen, and maybe these numbers are even outdated, but millions of hacks every single day. Is that right?
Woo! It's it's kind of moving toward from the M to the B to the T, Michael. So,
Yeah.
as I kind of hinted in my introduction, as we introduce more innovative technologies, what we're seeing is that the attack surface is broadening too. The vulnerabilities are increasing. So that means that the opportunities for hackers to attack is increasing. So that number is rolling. It's a running number.
And it's a serious number. I mean, it's a scary number.
Yes.
I mean, these are not small numbers that are getting bigger by the day. These are big numbers getting giant by the day.
That's right.
Let's face it, at least again, as I understand it, most of the hackers out there are not actually even caught.
95% are never caught. That's been the number from our research. And you're talking about just online, you have about 7 million online hacks per day. And a new attack happens around 39 seconds, every 39 seconds. So, as I said, that million is way far, in the billions at this point. But yeah, those numbers are very alarming. And the issue that kind of coincides with that is that the cybersecurity workforce is not able to keep up with it. From the traditional standpoint and the traditional task of cybersecurity consultants, analysts, there's already a shortage, but the shortage is going to increase as we, up the level of technologies we're using. So, those are some of the things that Infiltron tries to answer and give a solution for.
Well, and that's another point, right? Is that not only are the number of attacks increasing, but the number of people who are gaining broadband access and therefore creating more accounts, the more applications that are out there to have an account for, the number of IoT devices. Doug, talking a little bit more about that smart city piece. I mean, we're talking about billions of connected devices
Yes.
around the world. Every one of these things is just another point of vulnerability, right?
That's correct. And more like trillions of devices, and you could throw in anonymous devices. So very difficult to track. The devices become the method of attacking the other devices. And it's unlikely, or we feel with Infiltron, unlikely that you're going to have really solid security in home cameras, in cameras that sit by the roadside, in sensors and those kinds of things. They're probably not going to be secure very well. So we need internal solutions that can deal with that attack vector. The devices become so simple to use, and that's why we're seeing more attacks and more success in attacks.
So let's talk about Infiltron, because I want to wrap my head around this a little bit. And let me first start by asking, in terms of applications, clearly there's a lot of applications, but is this at the enterprise level? Is it able to help the individual? Give me a little sense on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, yes and yes. It is at the enterprise level. Infiltron was designed to fit into where it needed to be. The first conception of it was actually as an app that could sit on your phone and help you as a consumer. But we've recognized that at the enterprise level, governments, military bases, companies, manufacturing plants, that the basic premise behind the solution works on a mass level. So the answer to that is both.
So this is exciting to me on a personal level, because I got to tell you, I love smart technologies, right? Smart home devices, speaking at the individual level. And yet one constant question is, how secure are these things? And it's great to have, all these devices. And, my wife and I, we have a toddler, and we watched with horror on the news when there was that clip of a family with a young daughter who had somebody
over Christmas. Yeah,
exactly, hack into the nursery camera and talk to her like he was Santa Claus. I mean, this is terrifying to parents,
and it's real.
it's real, and yet as much as we want to have these devices in our homes, they do make life, more convenient or more accessible or whatever. But there is this threat, and let's face it, most people just don't have the capacity or the wherewithal or insights to properly protect themselves. So
Yeah.
how does the Infiltron help that individual?
So I'm glad you asked that. And it's interesting because I think we've been chasing after the security of a device and not looking at the security of the scenario and the people involved. Uh, that particular example is a difficult one to run down, but the bottom line is that there is a person who should have had access to that device and to that other person. And we can identify that person. And one of the things that Infiltron does is it does three-factor biometric identification. So we know who the individual is, and then we can monitor that person. An example that we would have in like a smart city or an IoT network, someone has to go and work on that radio or work on that camera. That person has an identity. We know who should have access to that, or we should. Before someone gets access to a physical device or the network that that device is attached to, we should be able to identify them. That's where our blockchain comes in. We store the biometric information on the blockchain so that it's very difficult for that to be spoofed in any way. We also have it so that not only does that person who is accessing that device have the authority to do it, but the person who is giving the authority to do it is also identified there. So that's the end-to-end protection of things. And if you did that with all of these devices, you'd worry a lot less about securing the device and worry more about who's touching the device, how is it being used, and observing those things.
Wow, that's really interesting. So when you're talking about deployments like that, it's scalable.
Absolutely. We've been able to scale with some of our paying customers fairly quickly. Right now, we're covering somewhere around 7 to 10,000 devices and users in beta. And we were able to scale up within 3 weeks. So, scalability, again, being in an environment like the military and the Air Force, scalability is another thing that kind of comes in the wheelhouse, and you just take everything that you've learned and in the spaces that you've been in, and you come up with a solution like Infiltron. So scalability is a major component of us. We wanted it to be easy and user friendly and able to protect coming out of the gate.
Sure. So the G20 has put together the Global Smart City Alliance that's managed by the World Economic Forum, who asked me to join their cybersecurity task force. And one of the things we talked to the cities about to see where should we create some foundational policies around cybersecurity. One of the foundational things was actually in the governance side. And so, Doug, I'll ask you in your own experience, oftentimes in cities that have actually created a position for CISO, as we call them, Chief Information Security Officer, oftentimes that individual is tasked with maintaining the security of the cybersecurity of the city, and has all the responsibility, but oftentimes not the authority, meaning not having the authority to choose which devices or which programs are being used by the city, or having control of a budget to select a solution like Infiltron. So how do you tackle that question when it comes to engaging cities?
Sure. And our message to CISOs or CISOs is this is your solution. We're here to answer that for you. And one of the issues that cities and security officers are always going to have is running down the latest threats, making policies, and making changes. It's a hamster wheel that we're always running off of. That's why we need to use artificial intelligence to analyze attacks and actually generate policies on the fly, and also the ability to show people this is what's happening, even if it's not happening in your network at this time. So what we want is a CISO to be in a position to say, another city in another region just experienced this thing. Our policies are being updated right now. When a CISO has an actual threat, they tend to get approved, they tend to get budget. But when you just have fears, that's not a good way to design almost a brick wall that's going to protect you from everything. That's not realistic. We have to use artificial intelligence and monitoring what's happening in other benchmarks that are not even us. And that's where I think cities, state agencies, counties, small governments, bases will all be able to do what we need to do, because it's approaching things a little bit more like with a scalpel than with a sledgehammer.
Yes. Well, let me ask you both this, and sadly our time is already running to an end here.
You said that,
and I feel like we're just getting started.
Good. Right.
But let's assume for a moment that Infiltron is deployed in every use case you can imagine, and let's go out 10, 20, 50 years, it doesn't matter. Explain to me and to our listeners and viewers, what is the impact that is created from this opportunity that Infiltron provides?
So I think I'll go first, because I know Doug's gonna simplify it for you. I think that we need to start in the smart city technologies, as far as they're concerned. We need to understand that they're all created equally when it comes to cybersecurity risks. They're going to, we want to be able to know what type of recyclables are in a trash can and that trash can is full. We want to be able to take steam and turn it into renewable energy. We want that. We know that Mother Earth needs to be healed. We are aware of that, even as cybersecurity folks. However, as we're introducing these technologies into a legacy system that is migrating to a smart city, what we see in the future is that we're able to be in a part of the development of these solutions, whereas they're being implemented as an afterthought, and we're having to kind of go back in time and realize what the vulnerabilities are, where we can work beside these solutions and show them decrease or mitigate the issues around cybersecurity from creation. That's what I see.
Yeah, and if I could just throw in there, Michael, we are losing the ability to encrypt things because of quantum computing, and we're going to reach a moment in which quantum can break all encryption. We need to be quantum secure, and Infiltron does that. So 10, 20 years from now, that will be the case. And the other thing is that blockchains as an information infrastructure will be commonplace, and we will be able to save biometric information on a blockchain, and that's going to keep us a lot more secure. Other solutions will begin to copy what Infiltron is doing 10 or 20 years from now, and we will have moved on to something even better.
Well said. Well, listen, I want to thank you both for not only your time today, but also for just this incredible work that you're doing now, and as I said at the beginning, the amazing service you've done for all of us and what you did before now. So it's an honor to have you both on Preview of Tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Michael, for having us, you and Peter.
Thanks, Michael.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Preview of Tomorrow. Listeners like you are essential to advancing our efforts to drive resiliency and sustainability for all. I ask that you give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever streaming platform you prefer. Your feedback helps us to grow and share these brief previews of what life in the future can be. In addition to thanking our guests today, I want to thank Peter Roy and Demetria Bridges for making this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and encourage others to also join us each week in previewing the possibilities of tomorrow.
Preview of Tomorrow is brought to you by Leading Cities, a global nonprofit driving resilience and sustainability for all by unleashing the potential of the world's cities. Join them at leadingcities.org.